Go back to 1973. Nixon is in the White House. The Allman Brothers are on every radio, drifting out of car windows you roll down by hand. The gas lines are long. The country feels uncertain in that particular early 70s way, like something big is ending even though nobody has said so yet. And you are pulling into a McDonald's parking lot on a Saturday afternoon, not because you are in a rush, not because it is the only option within reach, but because it is something to do. It is a treat, maybe a birthday. Maybe the kids have been good all week. Maybe it is just a Saturday, and Saturdays used to have a particular feeling to them. You push open the glass door and the smell hits you the moment you step inside. Beef fat, hot oil, something faintly sweet coming off the fryer. The counter is low. The menu is a board on the wall with plastic letters that someone swapped in by hand. And you can read the entire thing in under 10 seconds because there's not a lot on it. A teenager in a paper hat takes your order. You carry your own tray to a table. You sit in a plastic chair bolted to a plastic table. And you eat a burger that costs 55 cents. Now here is a number worth holding on to through everything that follows. In 1973, McDonald's had fewer than 3,000 locations in the entire United States. Today, that number is more than 13,700. That is more than 4 times as many restaurants serving roughly the same number of people. The food did not get 4 times more popular. Americans did not get 4 times hungrier. Everything around that burger, the economy, the neighborhoods, the shape of the American day, that is what changed. That is the story. The world before. Fast food in the 1970s was not what it is today. It was a novelty, a treat, a Saturday thing, a road trip thing, a birthday dinner if you were lucky thing. The average American family ate at a fast food restaurant maybe once a week at the most, and for many families it was less than that. It was not part of the daily rhythm. It was not the default. It was something specific that you did on specific occasions. What existed instead was a different kind of eating infrastructure built into the fabric of American neighborhoods. In Des Moines, in Tulsa, in Riverside and Baltimore and Syracuse and hundreds of cities like them, there were diners, lunch counters, family restaurants that had been open since before you were born, places where the woman who took your order had taken your parents' orders a generation earlier, places with a rotating pie case beside the register, a bowl of soup for 60 cents, and coffee that stayed at the same price all morning and got refilled without your ever having to ask. Here is something that may genuinely surprise you. A meal at a sit-down diner in 1972 cost about the same as a fast food meal, sometimes less, and you got a real plate. Someone brought it to you. Someone checked on you. The diner was not a luxury destination. It was not a special occasion. It was just Tuesday. It was just where you went for lunch between the morning and the afternoon. The diner itself had a logic to it that we no longer think about because it has been gone long enough that the memory of it has faded. The menu was short, maybe a dozen items, because the kitchen was small and the staff was small, and the point was not variety. The point was reliability. You knew what you were going to get. You knew what it cost. You knew how long it would take and what it would taste like and whether the coffee would be strong or weak, and which waitress would be on at noon on a Thursday. That consistency was not a limitation. That was the product. The food itself was different too. And this is meant precisely, not just as nostalgia. A fast food meal in 1973 meant a single patty burger, a small order of fries, and a small Coke. When small is used here, it means genuinely small. The original McDonald's small Coke was 7 fluid ounces. 7. The entire meal came in at roughly 590 calories. The burger patty weighed 1.6 ounces. The fries were cooked in beef tallow. They tasted like something with memory to it, something you would still be thinking about an hour later. And the eating pattern itself was different. People sat down. Even at fast food restaurants in those years, people sat down to eat. Drive-through windows did not come to McDonald's until 1975. And they did not spread across the chain until the early 1980s. You got out of your car, you went inside, you ordered, you waited, you carried your tray to a table and you ate it there. Eating still had a shape to it, a beginning and a middle and an end, even when that shape only lasted 12 minutes. Consider what that shape contained. Two men who had never met might share a four-top because the counter was full. The woman next to you might be a school teacher, a mill worker, a city clerk. You did not know her, and she did not know you, but you were both sitting down in the same room eating the same blue plate special, and the room had a particular sound to it. Coffee cups, short-order calls, the bell above the door. None of this was considered worth writing down. It was just the middle of the day. In 1973, a job at McDonald's was a high school kid's weekend work, pocket money. Fast food coexisted with a broader economy where a union factory job or a steady clerical position could genuinely feed a family of four and cover the rent. Fast food was affordable, not because wages had collapsed or corners were being aggressively cut, but because it competed with other things that were also affordable. The whole structure of the economy worked differently. McDonald's had 3,000 locations. Burger King had fewer than 1,000. Taco Bell barely existed outside a handful of markets. Wendy's was still mostly Ohio, a cheap, occasional, thoroughly American treat, and nothing more than that. How it changed. Now, here is where things get interesting, and if you follow the story far enough, a little sad. The transformation of fast food from an occasional treat into the default setting of American eating did not happen because people consciously decided to eat differently. It did not happen because Americans sat down one day and agreed they would rather eat alone in their cars in 90 seconds than sit at a table. It happened because the conditions that made the alternatives viable started to disappear one at a time, quietly, without any announcement or any vote or most people noticing until it was already done. The entire economic logic of the neighborhood diner rested on one reality. Rents were manageable, labor was affordable, and a working family had just enough to eat out several times a month without feeling the pinch. When commercial rents began climbing steadily through the 1970s and two-income households replaced one-income households, not by preference but by economic necessity, the diner math stopped working. A sit-down meal requires more staff per customer, more time per table, more overhead per square foot. Fast food required almost none of that. It was built specifically to require almost none of that. The drive-through window was the first structural change, and it arrived from an unlikely place. McDonald's introduced it in Sierra Vista, Arizona in 1975, built to serve soldiers at a nearby military base who could not leave their vehicles while in uniform. A workaround, a practical fix for one specific situation. Within 5 years, it had become the model for the entire industry. By 1983, more than half of all McDonald's revenue in the United States was coming through the drive-through window. You no longer had to stop. You no longer had to get out of the car. Eating became something that happened between other things, rather than as a thing in itself. Then, the portion sizes moved, and they moved steadily in one direction. In 1972, the McDonald's small Coke was 7 ounces. By 1994, the small had grown to 16 ounces, exactly what the large had been in 1973. What used to be the large was now the small. The industry did not announce this. There was no press release. The sizes grew the way water rises in a slow flood, an inch at a time, season after season, until one day you look down and realize you have no memory of what dry looked like. And the locations multiplied at a rate that is difficult to picture. Between 1975 and 1985, McDonald's opened more than 5,000 new American locations. 5,000 in 10 years. More than one new store every single day for an entire decade. Every day. For 10 straight years. That was just one chain. While all of this was happening, the diner was dying. Not because the food was worse. Not because people stopped wanting to sit. But because the economics that had allowed the diner to exist for decades had been quietly dissolved. The diner needed a neighborhood that still worked the old way. Those neighborhoods, one by one, were becoming something else. What happened to specific places? By the mid-1980s, the consequences were not trends or percentages. They were specific things happening in specific places to specific people. In Gary, Indiana, where the steel mills were going cold and a quarter of the workforce had lost their jobs over 5 years, The downtown lunch counters closed one by one through the early part of the decade. The men who had eaten at those counters every weekday for 20 years were gone, retired early, and suddenly, with little to show for it, relocated to wherever the work had moved, or still in Gary, but no longer with the few dollars it took to sit down somewhere for lunch. What stayed open was the McDonald's on Broadway. A Big Mac was $1.60. You could feed 2 kids for under $5. That arithmetic worked when almost nothing else did. The Redbird Diner had been on Broadway in Gary since 1951. 3 generations of steelworkers had eaten lunch there on weekday afternoons. It closed in March 1983, 8 months after the last blast furnace at U.S. Steel went cold. The owner, a man named Gerald Kowalski, whose father had opened it the year the mill opened, put a note on the door. It said, "Thank you for 32 years. Nothing else." There was nothing else to say. The building sat empty for 6 years. Nobody came to look at it. Nobody filmed it. It just closed, the way most things close, without ceremony, without anyone deciding it should be remembered. In Youngstown, Ohio, the steel industry employed more than 50,000 workers at its peak. By 1985, that number had fallen below 10,000. The neighborhoods around the mills, Briar Hill, Campbell, Struthers, had been built around the assumption that the mills would run. The churches were close to the mills. The schools were close to the mills. The lunch counters and the family restaurants were close to the mills and to the workers who ate at them every day. When the mills closed, the foot traffic that had supported those restaurants for 3 and 4 decades simply stopped, not slowed, stopped. A street that had 4 lunch counters in 1975 might have one by 1984 and none by 1988. The buildings did not disappear. They were just empty, with the signs still in the windows. In Flint, Michigan, in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, in city after city where the manufacturing economy came apart in the late 1970s and early 1980s, fast food did not cause the poverty. That is worth being plain about. Fast food did not cause deindustrialization or economic collapse, but it outlasted everything else because it could function in a neighborhood where everything else had closed. The diner required a customer with time and a little discretionary income. Fast food required only that you be hungry. By 1990, McDonald's had more than 11,000 American locations. The family diner count had fallen by an estimated 25% since 1970. Those 2 numbers, one rising, one falling, existed at the same time in the same country, often in the same communities. They were not coincidental. The calorie counts moved with the portions and with the frequency. By the mid-1990s, a standard medium combo meal was delivering between 1,100 and 1,400 calories. That is between half and 2/3 of the total recommended daily caloric intake for an adult, in one meal, in one sitting, in about 12 minutes. And fast food became the landscape itself. By the year 2000, there was a fast food restaurant within 5 minutes of 80% of the American population. Think about what that means for actual behavior. You did not have to decide to eat fast food. You had to actively decide not to. The default had changed. The effort had flipped. The diner, if one still existed near you, had become the special occasion. What we lost. We talk about fast food as a health story, an obesity story, and it is both of those things without question. But underneath the health story there is something else, something harder to measure, because it does not appear in any report or any database. We lost the meal as a social contract. The diner, and this is meant structurally and literally, not sentimentally, was a place where the auto mechanic and the insurance agent sat 3 stools apart and ordered the same thing off the same menu and paid roughly the same price. Not in some grand political sense, in the most ordinary possible human sense. You were both there. You were both people. You were both hungry. The food in front of you was the same food. For those 12 minutes, that was the entire situation. The fast food restaurant replaced the counter stool with a drive-through window. It replaced sitting down with eating in motion. It replaced a meal that required a small act of presence. You had to park, get out, go inside, be physically somewhere, with a transaction you could complete in 90 seconds without ever turning off the engine. That is not a small change in convenience. That is a fundamental change in what eating means and what it does inside a day. We lost the woman behind the counter who knew your order before you told her. Who knew you took your coffee black with no sugar? Who knew you did not like the eggs runny? Who asked after your wife by name because she remembered hearing last spring that she had been sick? That knowledge was not stored in any system. It was not backed up anywhere. It lived in one specific person, at one specific counter, in one specific neighborhood. When the diner closed, every piece of it disappeared. There is no way to quantify that kind of knowledge. No economist has a line item for it. It does not show up in productivity data or in consumer confidence surveys. It was just the accumulated fact of a person paying attention to you over years, because that was the nature of the place and the relationship. It was ordinary in the way that things you cannot replace are always ordinary until they are gone. And we lost the pause, the plain, ordinary 20-minute pause in the middle of the day. You sat down. Someone brought the food. You ate it without doing anything else and without looking at anything else. Nobody wrote about this while it was happening because it was not interesting. It was just Tuesday. It was just lunch. But it was the steady rhythm underneath ordinary American life for generations. A small, reliable interruption. And at some point in the 1980s, quietly and without anyone deciding it should end, it ended. So let this be what you carry out of it. If you ever sat at a lunch counter and the woman brought your coffee before you asked for it, before you even finished sitting down, before you unzipped your jacket, before you had said a word, you know what this story is about. That moment, that small and unremarkable act of being known, is what this is about. If you ever paid for a burger and a Coke with whatever coins were in your pocket and still had change to leave on the counter, if you ever ate at a place that had the same Tuesday specials it had always had, not because of a promotional calendar, but because that was just what Tuesdays were at that place, that was what they had always been. And you assumed without thinking about it that they always would be. You know what this story is about. If you ever drove past a building with brown paper over the windows and a note on the door, after 34 years, we have closed, thank you for your loyalty, and felt something you could not quite name, something sitting in the space between loss and simple recognition, something that did not have a word for itself. You know what this story is about. You have already lived the end of it.